Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining another installment of the NTC podcast. Aaron Washington, your host, back with you guys. Avi Tiagi is on my right. Glad to have him back for another awesome episode. And this one is even more special than usual, guys, because this is our 100th installment of NTC, which is kind of hard to believe. It's been, I want to say, about 3 years since we started this campaign here with the No Trade Clause podcast to go along with our website. And we've had a lot of different people on over the years. We've had several different people join me in hosting this podcast, and it's been a great experience thus far. Avi came along a little bit later. We've had him on for, what would you say, Avi? Maybe 6 or 7 pods by now that you've logged with
Yeah,
NTC?
something like that.
Yeah. So, but I mean, in any case, whether it's been 50 or 5, everybody's valued the same here. We value everybody's contributions, the guests that we've had on, the NBA players, the coaches, the executives, the media members, everybody that's been a part of this. If anybody is watching, we thank you so much for taking the time to discuss the NBA with us and give your thoughts on whether it be scouting or just some recent content, some recent news that's coming along in the NBA. Whatever the case may be, it's all valued. And of course, we thank you guys that are taking the time to watch this, the listeners, the watchers out there, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We know we're in a lot of different outlets, and you guys have your choice as far as what you want to use to view our content. But in any case, we thank you so much. And we're looking to take this thing to the next level and hopefully get another 100 episodes under our belt. That's the goal. And we can't wait to see where this goes, where it takes us, and who we have the opportunity to speak to going down the line. So I just wanted to put that out there for everybody. If you're joining us for the first time, thanks so much. I mean, you picked a great time. We feel like we've got our legs under us and we're starting to hit a groove here. So we're looking to just keep that going through however many episodes we have. Hopefully it's just indefinite. We just want to keep bringing you guys great content here as far as the NBA goes. But now that that's addressed, Avi, we have a really exciting topic for tonight's podcast. It's going to involve the Western Conference, specifically breaking down the elite tier of the Western Conference. Now, this is a little bit subjective. Some people may have this split up a little bit differently. But if you go to the standings and you look at how 4 teams have been performing so far, the top 4, they're all very close together, and their place in the standings has shifted back and forth multiple times. And it's hard to pinpoint how it's going to end up breaking down when we get to the end of the regular season. It can be in any order between these 4. So just based off of some of the metrics and, of course, the standings, we've come up with 4 teams that we believe are in the absolute elite tier of the Western Conference. And, of course, not just the Western Conference, but the NBA. All 4 of these teams have a strong case to be championship contenders. And Avi and I are going to break down exactly what puts them in this tier and how that might carry them or prevent them from winning a championship when it comes time to really step up their game in May and June later this year. So, Avi, there's 4 teams here, and there's a couple of others that we're going to discuss a little bit later that are kind of maybe close to that tier, but not quite. But we're going to start with the Minnesota Timberwolves here to get this conversation started. The Timberwolves, they had a solid season last year, but by many accounts, it was disappointing. You make that swing for Gobert. You send in so many draft picks, so many good young players to get him, and to come up short of even making the second round, definitely a disappointment. But they did have some struggles last year, the most prevalent of which was the absence of Karl-Anthony Towns. He missed a whole bunch of games. I believe it was about 2/3 of the season he missed for them last year. He came back pretty late in the campaign. This year, he's been healthy. Gobert's been healthy. That core has been healthy. They've been able to establish an identity. They've been able to get a lot of time together, and they've really gained a rhythm, specifically on the defensive end. That's where they've made their money. That's where their identity comes from. Defensively, as of today, on February 22nd, they rank number 1 in defensive rating. These numbers are coming from Cleaning the Glass, by the way. 108.5 points per 100 possessions allowed. And they've been able to supplement that with a pretty solid offense, 15th offense at 117 points per 100 possessions. If you have an elite defense and you have a solid offense that's not even top 10, you're still going to be pretty high up there when it comes to the hierarchy of the NBA. Now, their pace their win pace is pretty interesting too as well, Avi, because they're on pace for 60 wins right now. If you kind of extrapolate their performance over 82 games, they have never won 60 games in a season. The closest they ever got was 03-04, that storied campaign Western Conference Finals appearance with KG. They won 58 games, so they were a couple wins short. But this could be their moment to make history. They have an adjusted net rating of plus 6.9. That's number 2 in the entire NBA. And another thing that's in their favor for the rest of this campaign is the number of road games versus home games. They only have 10 road games left. So they have way more home games than road games. So adding all that together, there's a good case for them to be number 1 in the Western Conference at the end of it. And maybe even a pretty solid playoff run awaits them as well when we get to the end of the season. So those are the numbers. Those are the metrics. They look great so far. They have 2 All-Stars. I'm going to hold off on my rant. I didn't believe it should be 2. Looking at my list for my ballot for All-Star. But in any case, they got 2 All-Stars, and they've been fantastic by any stretch of the imagination, any kind of metric you look at. So that's a broad view. What have you seen from the Timberwolves so far? And, do you believe that they have a strong playoff run in them just based on what they've done so far?
Well, I think they have a strong playoff run. Depends on how what you consider a strong playoff run. Based on their seeding, I actually think their chances will be pretty good because as we've covered, they don't have that many road games left. They have the 20th most difficult schedule, so they have the 11th easiest schedule going forward. They don't have that many tough games left. Yeah, they have some games against the Clippers and against the Cavaliers, but on the whole, it's not as bad as it is for some other teams. Long term, if I'm considering a deep playoff run to be at least a conference championship or further, I think it really will depend for them on what shape the Nuggets look like as we round into the playoffs because the Nuggets are kind of known for tailing off in the second half of the season.
Mm-hmm.
When I watch the Timberwolves, everything starts with that defense and their depth.
Yep.
The fact that they can go 10, 11 deep with very good quality players now that they have Monte Morris as well. There's almost no weaknesses in the rotation. Everyone knows exactly what their role is. Gobert is the fulcrum that he was with Utah, only now everyone around him pretty much is a good defender at all times. You could make a case that Mike Conley or Anthony Edwards are their weakest defenders other than Karl Anthony Towns, and that's just extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
To have those guys be your weak points other than Karl, very few teams in NBA history can point to having those type of defenders be their second weakest defender on the court at any given point of time.
Facts.
And with the Karl problem, yeah, defensively he is the person who you want to attack, but because they have so many people who are good at trailing around screens and they're good at making sure that Karl doesn't get into unfavorable switches much of the time, they can actually keep him out of danger. And then offensively, I mean, we know what he is.
Deadly man. Deadly shooter. Best big man shooter of all time? Yes or no? Or would you still stick with Dirk? I know it's a tough
Oh
question.
man, I'd have to think about it. I mean, oh man, oh you sprung that on me. I think he might be if we're going like pure big as like if we're just going pure center. He definitely is in my opinion.
40% 3-point shooter for his career,
Yeah,
43% this season. Crazy, man.
and he's been like that since he got to the league. Like it was like day one. Oh yeah, he can shoot, and he can shoot in a way we haven't seen anybody else shoot like before.
Yep.
I don't know if I'd call him an all-star this year. I actually probably wouldn't, but he is phenomenal offensively. And the fact of the matter is, in crunch time, if he is not asking for the ball the way he has in the past, sometimes in the clutch when they need him, and he's been exploited on the other end, they now have enough depth with their personnel that they actually could just sub him out and just try to win the game in a scrappy fight with Edwards and Conley handling the ball.
That's exactly what happened in that game where he had 60,
Yeah, exactly.
65 or 62.
Something like that. It was like 60, yeah, 62, 64, something like that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he didn't play the last 5 minutes. He got subbed out. That's just incredible to me that you're on that type of a run where you're draining every shot and the coach yanks you 5 minutes left and actually felt confident in that decision. It just helps when you have a guy like Naz Reid able to kind of come in, and he's a solid defender in his own right. And he's a solid shooter in his own right. Maybe not
Yeah,
talented, but
exactly.
very strong. So, I mean, it just kind of reinforces the point you made about their depth. Bringing in Monte Morris, very solid move. Another kind of savvy veteran, just like Mike Conley. He just comes in, mans the offense very well, knows what to do, very low turnover guy, just high basketball IQ. And once he gets his legs under him, he's just going to be an all around solid offensive player that, yeah, you're not going to run a ton of things through him, but he's going to be a connector. He's going to be a low mistake point guard that you can really just trust with the ball in his hands, whether it's the middle of the game, the end of the game. If Collie needs to rest for whatever reason, needs to sit out, hey, Monte is one of the best guys you can have coming in to supplement him. So I just love how they're kind of set up as a roster.
Bingo. I don't even have to add anything there other than to say I'm glad Nikhil Alexander Walker has kind of found a spot for him because the past couple years it feels like he's been shuffling from team to team trying to
Yeah.
find his role in a rotation. A couple years ago with the Pelicans, during a stretch of injuries, they were almost leaning on him as an offensive fulcrum, like almost as a number two in an offense, which was never a role that he should have ever had. But now on this team, he's perfect as like a ninth or 10th man. They just throw him out there. He's making his threes this year, which is great for him. And then defensively, he's playing extremely competitively. He's great at going over screens as well. He fights. Well, not literal fights, but he fights over screens. He's very physical. It They have a perfect 10-man rotation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nikhil Alexander Walker, 37% on the season from three. Really solid. Even 76% from the free throw line. So his efficiency is up. And I mean, like you said, he just fights so hard. That's something you're going to notice if you watch a lot of Timberwolves basketball. He's not going to give an inch. He's going to be in
Yeah.
every play. He's not going to give up. He doesn't die on screens like some other guys do when they're put in that kind of situation. A long guy, 6'5", but I don't know what his wingspan is, but it's a pretty decent wingspan.
Oh yeah, it's
That
huge.
really helps him as well. So I mean, just across the board, and we haven't even talked about Jaden McDaniels. Really, I mean, just another great defender. Like you said, I mean,
All defense candidate.
exactly. You're not going to be able to pick on Cat or pick on Conley or Monte because there's so many defenders in the lineup that they can come in and supplement and help cover and help and rotate. And another thing about this, you can't just be a great defense with great players on paper. They have to be connected.
Yes.
So their communication is great. Coach Finch has done a great job of keeping them kind of locked in. They all know their roles. And yes, Gobert has been individually better as a defender, but in the team concept, they've all been really solid together. And it just jumps off the page when you're watching them play as a team. So,
I actually think fittingly, talking about their defense, it feels fitting for me to almost finish it off talking about how much more comfortable Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert look considering their altercation last year, because those two almost scream to me as, oh yes, this is a well-oiled machine now compared to last year where it felt really disjointed. Gobert didn't look confident. There were times when he didn't know, oh, should I block the shot here? Am I supposed to rotate off? When am I help side supposed to try to snuff out two threats at once? When should I stay locked onto my man? There was some confusion. You watch Kyle Anderson, it seems like he didn't know sometimes, oh, okay, are we passing this off? Am I staying locked onto my man? But I mean, this year, Kyle Anderson as a backside forward, just ready to help at any given time, stunting at defenders. He's always been a really good defender, even if he's slow mo on offense. I mean, those two as well in combination, they've been crushing opposing backup units routinely on defense just because of the sturdiness of having Gobert there, and then you can take out Carl and sub in um, Kyle Anderson, and then you still have Jaden McDaniels, and you can throw in some bench guard lineups now with Monte Morris and Nikhil Alexander Walker, and you will still be splendid on defense with that backup unit. And then offensively, with Monte now there, you have a chance with your backup unit to actually generate some scoring from the perimeter because Shake Milton wasn't really doing that. But I mean, Monte can still fill it up if you give him a chance.
definitely. Now that he's healthy, he just needs some games under his belt. He missed a
Yeah,
ton of time with the Pistons. So now that he's back, he should just get better by the game. So I think, we're in agreement that, their strengths are really just the defensive versatility. They have so many ways that they can really hold their own on that end of the floor. If I had to come up with a weakness, it's kind of hard to do that, but we could go with offensive inconsistency.
yeah.
They are 15th. So I mean, I looked at their shooting numbers before this, and it's very solid. So it's not really the 3-point percentage that kind of bogs them down. It's really the other shots, and if you think about some of the guys on the roster, like Kyle Anderson, like you mentioned before, not the greatest offensive player. He's not really going to inspire a lot of confidence in that way. Uh, be a great shooter. I happen to think he has possibly the ugliest jump shot in the NBA. I don't know how he even like gets it off
Yeah.
at all. It doesn't make sense to me.
It's
Uh,
not Sean Marion, but it's not great.
no, no, absolutely not. It's the biggest hitch I've maybe even ever seen in a jump shot.
Oh my
It's
god, yeah.
insane. So yeah, that the offense could bog them down a little bit, and I think it's a reason that could cause them to struggle. I mean, if we're talking about a second round or a conference finals appearance, they really need to generate some offense. It could come back to bite them a little bit. If Alexander Walker maybe has some struggles on offense, if the shot drops off a little bit, they can have some trouble in that area. But I mean, their defense don't see any reason as to why it would struggle. And now Gobert is in a situation where he's not going to be exploited like he was in Utah, where he has to chase guys on the perimeter and cover for a perimeter defense that's lacking. He has the support now, so I think his strengths are just going to be amplified, and he's not going to have to worry about leaning into his weaknesses as much like he did before. So that should be addressed in this new team setting for him.
Yeah, watching him on Utah was tragic because I feel like he was getting blamed so much for his defense, and I still thought what he was trying to do, covering three people at once at times, was just remarkable. To have a center be like racing around the way he was, but again, if I had to point to weaknesses, this is where we lean into it. We still know why the Clippers were able to five out them so much, and it's partially because they could stick Reggie Jackson or Terrence Mann on Rudy Gobert and feel absolutely no fear. And that concern might still exist, and especially on a team like this one, where they only have one person who's generating consistent rim pressure as a driver. Carl can do it sometimes, but he's not doing that with consistency. And in high level playoff matchups, the defenders aren't going to be weak enough to allow him to just drive by with as much ease as they do in the regular season.
Right.
So, and Conley doesn't do that anymore. Nikhil Alexander Walker doesn't do that. Monte Morris might be able to do that, but coming off of injury, I don't want to count on it yet.
Yeah.
So there's only one guy right now we know for sure who we can depend on, and it's Anthony Edwards.
Ant-Man.
And that's
Yep,
really scary when you only have one guy you can really count on for that, especially in such a drive and kick based league.
for sure. That's what it comes down to in the playoffs. Like those weaknesses that aren't really a big deal, from 82 games playing all these different teams, they're amplified in the playoffs. So
Yep.
those like little nitpicks that we have, they're going to just get bigger and bigger as it goes along. So even starting in round 2, I think they can struggle with that a little bit. So
And one last point, they have a strong 9 or 10 man rotation. That doesn't end up being as useful in the playoffs as it is in the regular season
right,
because your amazing bench
trump
isn't
down.
going to be playing as many minutes.
Yep.
And then you'll really have to see, oh, is this Carl and Gobert thing going to hold up well if we're playing against the Suns, the Nuggets, the Pelicans, or any of these other teams, even in the second round, much less the conference finals? That's when there's some trepidation. I mean, they're not a bonkers offense right now, anyways. So
Mm-hmm.
that
That's
that
where we're
that's
gonna
where
have
there's
to
some concern.
absolutely. But this next team we're going to cover, Avi, they have no such concerns when it comes to their offense.
Oh my god.
The Los Angeles Clippers, they're a monster. They started the season 3-7, coming off of a 6-game losing streak. Some of those were around the time of the play-in tournament games. Since then, they've been 33-10. It's propelled them to a 36-17 record. That's third in the Western Conference. Second offense with 121.5 points per 100 possessions. So that is not a problem for them whatsoever. On the flip side, though, they don't struggle with defense either. And defense, actually, before they really got their feet under them, that's what kind of sustained them when the offense was still kind of finding its way. They currently rank 8th in defensive rating as of today, 114 points per 100 possessions allowed. And they have a plus 5.0 adjusted net rating that's 5th in the NBA. So when you look at them as a whole from both ends of the court, they can do it all. They can go out there and get points. You got Kawhi, you got PG, you got James Harden, who for multiple years was the leading man as far as points per game in the NBA. On the other side of the court, Kawhi and PG, they do that same. They're just as powerful, versatile on defense as offense. You bring in a guy like Zubac to man the middle. He's not a Gobert, but a very solid rim protector in his own right. Terrence Mann can hold his own on defense. Westbrook is still going to hustle, and James Harden is just like we talked about with like Mike Conley and those guys. Like, yeah, individual defender, they're not the greatest, but when you have those wing pieces in the rim protection to supplement him, he's not bad. And especially if he's playing a bigger player, he's going to be
Yeah.
more at home because he's always been stronger as a post defender rather than chasing a speedy guard around the perimeter. That's still not quite his forte, but he's not terrible. He gives some effort. He's been better this year. And I think part of the reason for that is just playing with a roster he knows is going to have his back. If he does go out there and make a gamble and somehow gets beat, it's not going to be game over for the Clippers. There's still going to be a chance to get a stop, and he doesn't have to worry about getting absolutely exploited on every possession. So for them, there's so many pieces of the equation that are coming together. They have the offensive production, like we just mentioned, the shooting, the defense. They have depth as well. Just thinking about the rotation. Hey, if something happens to Zubac, like he misses a few weeks, like he did before the All Star break, here comes Mason Plumlee to kind of supplement that offense and give them some passing ability from the 5 spot, give them the rebounding, and you have Westbrook off the bench. Perfect role for him, by the way.
Yes.
He's been
Perfect.
off the bench. It just fits him so well. It's like that energy that he brings to the court every night, harnessed in a role off the bench as a sixth man, not having to play all these minutes with 3 other elite offensive talents. It fits so well. So him as a spark plug is just like he's just made for this role in the latter stage of his career. It all fits so well. So Tyrone Lue is still a mastermind as a coach. That kind of ties all the pieces together. And yeah, I mean, ever since they made that trade and they had some games to kind of figure out what they were doing on offense and kind of separate Westbrook from that other core bunch, that's what's made the difference. Oh, and Norman Powell. Let's not forget about
Yes.
Norman Powell.
Don't forget Norman Powell.
Another, yeah, very strong bench contributor on offense. So they have they're rolling right now. They're in a great place. They might end up top of the West, but I mean, bare minimum, they're having home court advantage in the first round. So that's kind of the story on them. There's so much in their favor, but I know there's so much more we get into here. So, what you got to say about this new and improved Clipper squad?
The stats. I mean, every time I look at what I'm about to say, I'm just like, okay, remember these are the stats. But every time I see them, they just make me laugh and shake my head because they're absolutely ridiculous. Since December 1st of this year, they're 28-7 with a +9 cleaning the glass a point differential per 100 possessions, with the number one offense in the league that's scoring 125 points per 100 possessions, which is ridiculous. And it's not just driven. It's their bench is great, but it's not driven solely by the bench.
Right.
Their starting lineups or their main lineups, where they have Paul George, Harden, Kawhi, Terrence Mann, and a center. Those lineups of theirs make up about 500 minutes worth of lineups that they've played this year, and they're outscoring opponents by 15 points per 100 possession with those
Jeez.
guys. I
They're
mean,
putting in work.
that's absurd. That's crazy. You should not be able to do that. Like I
Right.
know you have that star power, and I know how good Terrence Mann and Plumlee and Zubac and the centers are, and that you have Norman Powell and Westbrook, and just even Coffee's coming in for some of these minutes.
Yeah, he's been
But
solid as
you
well.
should not be able to be as good as they are. And it all comes down to they've done such a good job of sacrificing individually to make sure the team improves.
For
Paul
sure.
George is taking less of a playmaker role than he has in years past and
Hmm.
delegating more of that to James Harden.
Yep.
Harden has just decided it's fine. I'm not going to be the big time scorer I once was. I'll average 17 or 18 a game, but I'm going to be that dynamic playmaker similar to how I was with the Nets. And every time I shoot, it will go in. Like I'm solely focused on efficiency with my smaller volume and then a huge playmaking load.
Hmm.
Westbrook, completely devoted to coming off the bench. Norman Powell, he's lived this life for years. He's a veteran with this. Terrence Mann, Terrence Mann's usage is almost nothing at this point, but it's
Yeah,
completely fine
really
because
well.
when he's touching the ball, his shots are actually starting to go in after a slump to start the year. So they're fine on that front. Zubac knows exactly what he is as a drop big. Same with Plumlee. And it helps when Kawhi is healthy and Kawhi's Kawhi. So
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, this team is ridiculous.
They
It's
really
it's
are.
really it is an all-star team. Like you really could make the case. I was seriously considering putting Harden on the all-star team, and he's actually moving this year on defense. He's
He was
shuffling his feet.
worthy. He had a case for sure.
It's
He's been so good.
This team is
Everybody is
silly.
just. I think it's
It's
just.
silly.
Yeah, they're in a perfect place in their careers now to where none of them have to shoulder too much of the responsibility. Like you said, with Paul George now being more of a guy that, hey, he come off of screens, he's coming off
Yeah,
of pin downs, he's getting great looks from three with great screeners. I mean, they can use Westbrook as a screener. They have those great big men as screeners to get him space, and he's comfortable in that role as well. He's done that in the past, so now he's not going to get worn down. Kawhi's not going to get worn down. Harden is not going to get exploited. He has lost a step, but like you said, he's not playing in that role as much as he used to as a primary ball handler, dominating every possession. Sometimes he could be a spot three-point shooter, and he's
yeah.
good at that role. He can do that just fine. So now that everybody, hey, their responsibilities have gone down a little bit, instead of being a 30% usage player, hey, maybe you're in the low 20s or something to that effect. It just boosts everybody's game, everybody's efficiency. They amplify each other's game. And then it's like when the bench comes in, they don't lose a step really. With a lot of teams in the NBA, you bring in the bench, it's like, okay, relax a little bit. You don't have those game-changing threats on offense out there on the floor anymore. You can't really do that with the Clippers, especially with Westbrook coming in. You can't take your foot off the gas. So he's coming in, he's having a great impact with them. And I'm glad you brought up Amir Coffey because there have been a few games here. Kawhi missed, I think, their last game before the All-Star break. Oh, hey, let's bring in Amir Coffey, 6'7" wing, to come in here and give us some good minutes. I mean, yeah, he's not playing a ton of minutes and his usage is very low, just like Terrence Mann. But I mean, 45% on the season from three, he
He's
just
just
knows the
making
role,
everything.
does it. Yeah, he's just coming in and being a low usage star. So this is a guy it's easy to forget about him, but he is 26. He's experienced. He's been around for a while. He's been with the Clippers for a while. He kind of knows the lay of the land, and everybody's just come to a point, like you said, they've realized that we have to be great as a unit. We've been great individually before in years past with the Raptors, Spurs with Kawhi, and the Thunder, the Pacers with Paul George, the Thunder with Westbrook. Now it's time to come together and be a great unit, and they've done that so well. So in any game you watch, they're going to really put the pressure on you at both ends of the floor for 48 minutes. There's not really going to be any kind of let up in their game, and just super impressed with what they've done. And they're not even giving any minutes to PJ Tucker. That's kind of crazy that they have him just kind of collecting dust. They sent him home before the All-Star break. They said, hey, just go get a head start on your vacation and we'll see in a couple weeks. So they
That's
have,
fine.
it's such a luxury. They just have so many pieces that could really contribute. Bones Highlands collecting dust. I feel kind of bad for him because I know he has more to contribute. He just doesn't have the chance right now with Westbrook and Terrence Mann. But that's how it goes on a championship team. Sometimes you just kind of have to wait your turn, and I'm sure he'll get more opportunities in the future. But for now, it's just he's just going to have to deal with watching all these wins rack up on the sideline.
I mean, he can't really defend. I mean, that's kind of the issue. It's not even the
That's
offense
his
always
Achilles
with him.
heel.
He can't
Yeah,
defend. That's the reason the Nuggets traded him in the first place. He's just an awful defender to watch. I'm not trying to pick on him. It's just it is what it
yeah,
is.
it's facts.
And especially when you're on a team like this, I mean, just Harden and Westbrook aside, you can look at those two. But if you look at this team as a whole and just where they've been individually at different points, Mason Plumlee was just toiling away on the Hornets, almost considered a throw in some ways. Tice was cut, right? Coffee was in trade rumors for so long, where it was, oh, he's like this low volume bench guy. I mean, he's kind of a 3-and-D guy, but what do we do with him? He had his name just floating around in trade rumors to almost every team in the league for a year there. Terrence Mann had his name a whole bunch of times thrown in trade rumors, and he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't hitting shots at the start of the season, and his usage has completely disappeared, and he's not complaining either. Westbrook is setting screens for other guards and for Kawhi and Paul George. I
I
mean,
love that.
considering what the discourse was when he was with the Lakers, where it was, hey, Westbrook's not going to set a screen for anybody. Westbrook's not going to be involved in the action or try to involve himself unless he has the ball. Harden's I mean, rightfully been criticized for never moving his feet on defense and just being like, hey, you guys just switch or do whatever, and I'm just going to be in the post every once in a while and try to defend
Mhm.
there. I'm not moving my feet at all. The fact that they've gone this entire group of 10 men to just throw aside egos, throw aside whatever prior ideas they had about how they want to play basketball, and then just come together to play this one devastating, dominant style of team ball, I think is such a credit to Ty Lue and all of his assistants for being able to work individually with each of these players to help them hone in on the skills that they need, like with Harden and his catch and shoot 3 point shooting, or with
Mhm.
Westbrook and working on redeveloping himself as a cutter. And to have the coaching staff do that with these players individually and then have it all work together as a team is just coach of the year this year is going to be tough. And you could really make a case for Tyronn Lue as coach of the year just for
Oh,
that.
for sure. For sure. Like, coach of the year is always tough, but this year especially, when
Oh
you
my
look
god,
at
this year is
all
so
4 of
much
these
worse than past
teams,
years.
and then you go to the East, and you have another, that I don't know about how many coaches over there that really have an opportunity. I would say maybe one right now. I
I
know
give
one.
Bickerstaff and maybe Missoula a look. I think those are
Yeah,
the
yeah.
maybe Nurse, but with him beat out, he's just not going to win it.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not enough wins. I know one coach that definitely will not win Coach of the Year in the Eastern Conference. I just
All I'll
don't.
say is that JJ was right. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I think he's right too. Honestly, that's tragic, really, over there in the Eastern Conference. Uh, but yeah, I mean the consensus here on the Clippers is, I mean, they've been so strong, and there's no reason to believe that they're gonna could not continue to be a great team down the stretch. They have everything you need. The only thing that can hold them back at this point is health. That's the only
Oh,
really weakness I see in this team. I mean, I don't want to play them in the playoffs if they're healthy at 100%. I do not want to see them. If they are 100%, I think they have as great an opportunity as any team in the NBA to win a championship. And I've
I'm just
historically
knocking on wood, man. Just
just find whatever wood you got in your room and just hit it
yeah,
right
man.
now because we want to see it. We need to see Kawhi go through a whole playoff run healthy. It's been too long. But for the Clippers, I mean, this is their prime opportunity. They have the depth, they have the sacrifice, they have the shooting has been great. They're first in the league in three-point percentage at 39.3. They're hitting everything. That's what you need if you're really gonna, just have an incredible offense and a great chance to win a championship. But they just need to be healthy. If they're healthy, they have everything they need. And for Harden specifically, this is a big stretch for him because we know
Yeah.
he's had playoff failures in the past. Just go back to last spring and look at those last two games in that Sixers Celtics series. And that tells you all you need to know about his history on that front. But this year, it's a different story. He doesn't have to bear that brunt alone, that burden. If he is inefficient, if he has one of those games to where he's off, it's not a death sentence because he's not one. They don't depend on him that much for the production.
Yep.
Paul George can come through. Kawhi is going to come through. Kawhi comes through every time. He's the anti-Harden. In the playoffs, he ups his game
Hey,
every time.
Harden gets a bad rap sometimes. Like I know how many playoff series he's had recently where it's just like, oh, I'm not even gonna shoot the ball, or oh, all of a sudden I'm just gonna keep shooting and never pass you the ball, or like defensive, I'm not gonna move. But I feel like people overlook how good early Harden was. Just people completely throw out early Harden just because of that one series against the Spurs where Manu blocked him, and it was just like really
Oh man,
embarrassing how he lost that game to
he was
those Spurs
awful
without
though.
Kawhi. Like I think that just completely painted a picture of Harden, young Harden, even being a complete choker in the playoffs. But he performed really well in the playoffs in his early years, and that's also kind of why this is so important for him because this year, okay, if he doesn't feel like he wants to shoot, the matchup doesn't uh, like warrant that. That's fine. Just keep
Yeah,
being a
he'll
playmaker.
be
Just
fine
pass it to Paul George and Kawhi. It'll be good, and you
for
can
sure.
probably win your championship this year. And once you do that, the narrative will probably switch almost completely. People will go back then and probably start talking about how you were in 2015 when you lost to the Warriors, or in 2018 when you lost to the Warriors and you were ungodly, just an MVP all year and almost one man show carrying it, the team at times to that 7 game series against the Warriors, the peak Warriors, the Kevin Durant Warriors. Like
Hmm.
he's had really good playoff runs before, and it's just that it's so easy to throw them aside because he also has so many other playoff series where he just hasn't lived up to what he can be. And this is the year for him to finally put everything aside, dig into what the team is asking him to do, play real defense and win the championship that has eluded him for so many years.
Exactly. They have a prime opportunity to get there. They've never been to the finals, so I would love to see them do it this year.
Yeah.
Really kind of break through. This next team, they've been to the finals last year. This is nothing new for them. They have the experience, they have the pedigree. The Denver Nuggets are looking to repeat. And as we know, Avi, that's not an easy task.
Yeah.
When you're coming off of a long playoff run, you have one of the shorter off seasons. You've logged a lot of minutes over the last couple of years. Things can start to weigh on you a little bit. And that might be a reason as to why we've seen the Nuggets taper off a little bit. They lost 3 games in a row before the break. They're down to the 12th offense in the NBA right now, 118.3 points per 100. 12th defense, 114.9 points per 100. 36-19 record puts them fourth in the Western Conference, and they're plus 3.8 in adjusted net rating at that puts them at about eighth overall in the NBA. So, I mean, their numbers are okay. There's nothing super alarming here, but they've slumped a little bit. When you're looking at a team that finished number one in the West last year, defending NBA champions, they had a 5-man lineup that we've seen just obliterate people. I mean, if you watch them that first game against, I think it was the Lakers, the game one, shredded them. It just
Oh.
looked like they were going to march right back to the mountaintop. Everybody's just scared for their life watching the Nuggets in that scenario. And now things have tapered a little bit. I think some of it may be a little fatigue. I mean, we got to think about how many minutes Jokic has played the last 3 years. Like, if we go back and just look at how
Yeah.
much of a burden he's had to do everything. When Jamal was out, when Michael Porter Jr. was out, he had to do so much for them. He's still, of course, having to do a lot for them, but maybe it was just time for them to have a little bit of a break here. I think for them, it's really come at a perfect time. So, as I mentioned before, they lost their last 3 games before the break: 2 against the Kings, 1 against the Bucks. In the last 2 weeks specifically, they've only been 20th in offense. So that's really kind of hurt them. They just haven't generated the points like they were before. Jamal Murray, the last 5 games, only at about 15 points a game,
Yeah.
about 39% from the field. 3-point percentage has been okay at about 39%, but the free throw percentage is weak at 60%. So it just makes me think that, yes, they needed a break. And I think also the fact that they're getting worn down now more than maybe last year, they don't have the same bench production as they had last year. They don't have Bruce Brown anymore. They don't have that super strong bench like
Oh,
Jeff
I have
Green,
some stats
who's
for
giving them
that.
great minutes. Yeah, just across the board, man, it's just tough sledding. So the starting lineup is set to do even more. They're even more burdened. So, yeah, it's just they're having to go to these lineups. I think Mike Malone's kind of trying to mix and match a little bit, looking for some consistent production off the bench. And they're leaning a lot into young guys. When Strother is a part of the rotation, when Peyton Watson's a part of the rotation, these guys aren't proven. They have been around for a long time. So when they get elevated minutes, yes, they're great players and they have their moments, but they're going to make mistakes. They haven't been around long enough to really understand exactly what to do what situation uh, when it comes down to it every single game, especially playing some of the better teams. So those are some of the highlights. They still have the experience. They still have arguably the best player in the NBA, but that bench could come back to bite them a little bit down the line. What do you think about that?
If the question here is, am I a little bit concerned about where the Nuggets are? Well, first off, I'd just like to say Jamal Murray's finishing stretch for the All Star break. I remember when we were doing the All Star ballot, which, by the way, I still think is. I feel like it's ridiculous how early they make coaches have to decide this. I feel like I wish it was a little later, but I understand why. It's because players have to book their vacation spots or whatever.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But if I were doing it even if I were doing the All Star ballot thing because I went to watch more games and stuff just to really clarify my ballot, Jamal Murray made my decision a little bit easier when I was thinking between him and Edwards and Chet Holmgren, and I
Yeah.
started really watching them more. He made my decision easier about which two to keep and which one to leave off. But not to blame him in any way, but I do think, as you're saying, the lack of bench protection I think might be hurting him more than anybody else, and it wouldn't surprise me if he started to taper off even more towards this back half of the regular season. Not necessarily even because of the strength of schedule, although there's their strength of schedule is all right. They don't have that many tough matches, but they do have 3 against Minnesota, which will be pivotal, I think, to determining their
That's
seed. They
that's
could end up
critical.
second,
Yeah.
the 4 seed. Maybe they fall down to the 5, depending on what happens with the Pelicans. But if you're asking me whether or not I'm concerned, and that was the original question, I think, I'm not all the way out because they still have Jokic and
Yeah,
Murray, and
they
they have
have a
awesome
chance.
starting
You got the
lineup.
best player in the league. You're to be in the hunt for sure.
But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned. So I went back to look at this juncture last season, like right at the All-Star break, which is when we're recording. They had the number one offense on cleaning the glass. They had a 119 cleaning the glass offensive rating when the average offense was at 114.7. This year, the average offense has jumped all the way up to 116.4 for reasons we've discussed in the prior pod with Coach Nick. Check that out. It's,
Hmm.
the proliferation of these young players who are extremely skilled, who have grown up in this sort of environment and are excellent at driving and shooting. And so they were already going to lose a little bit of their advantage. And then you top that off with the fact that they don't have Bruce Brown anymore. And
That
their
hurt.
offense right now is at a 118.3. And you ask, now why is that the case? I mean, their starting 5 is still awesome, right? So I went to go look into the lineup data. And this is where the Bruce Brown loss feels immense. So last season, their starting 5 in a huge sample was outscoring opponents by 12 points per 100 possessions. This year, that starting 5 is doing the exact same thing, despite Jokic not being as hot shooting wise as he was last year. I'll get to that later. The big difference when they had Bruce Brown in for Jamal Murray with almost 500 possessions played over the regular season, they were outscoring opponents by 16 points per 100 possessions.
Mm.
That KCP, Bruce Brown, Michael Porter, Aaron Gordon, Jokic lineup was crushing people. So that meant, wow, you have a really strong, like a group of 6 players that you can rotate in and out. And in a playoff setting, that was really useful because now we only need we can go with an 8-man lineup because Jokic can play so many minutes because of how he plays as a center and the fact that he's not running up and down the court as much. So there's not as much strain on his ligaments.
Hmm.
So you can play him more than you do other players. So, hey, now we just need Christian Brown, just give us a couple minutes. Jeff Green, you two, we'll cobble together some minutes as needed, and it'll be enough. Without Bruce Brown now you're asking a lot of Payne Watson and Christian Brown. Now they have to step up. Reggie Jackson, they have to step up and
Yeah.
be Mr.
Reggie.
6, 7, and 8, and
Yep.
they have to try to account for what Bruce Brown was doing, and they haven't shown that ability, and that's why I'm really worried for them,
Hmm.
especially when you consider how much stronger the West is this year than last year.
Yeah, it's a tougher road for sure, with that, especially at the top.
It really is. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, last year the Warriors made the second round and lost to the Lakers, who they were able to crush. And this year, the Lakers and Warriors aren't anywhere near the top 4 because of
Yeah,
how good all the other teams have gotten. So
exactly.
I mean, I don't know, man. It's very concerning to me. Also, I just want to note the Jokic shooting numbers. I'm not sure it'll be a factor, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. So this year, his true shooting percentage is down a little bit, and that's partially driven by the fact that his 2-point shooting is down. So I went back to go see why. Well, last year during a campaign where I argue he should have won MVP, he was shooting 69% on hook shots, and he had a 62% effective field goal percentage on jump shots. So that's including his long mid range shots and his 3-point jump shots.
Right.
This year, that's down to um, 60% on hook shots and 54% effective field goal percentage on jump shots. It's
Mm.
not even the 3-point percentage is down a little bit, but it's also his mid ranges are down. And then again, he's making less hook shots than he was last year.
Right.
His numbers last year were astronomical, out of this world, outlandish. Any adjective you want to use that just says out of this world, out of his mind. He was unconscious last year in those
Oh
ranges.
yeah. Hmm.
This year, he's a little bit more human. Well, if that happens in the playoffs and he's a little bit more human than he was last year when he was just hitting these step back 1-legged 3-pointers over Anthony Davis.
Prayers.
Yeah. If he can't do that this year and he's a little bit more tired and Jamal Murray's had to shoulder more of an offensive load and he's not as well rested as he was last year, when again, you could just sub in Bruce Brown and everything was okay. And you don't have that 6th guy you can count on.
Yeah, could be in
Yeah, I'm a
trouble.
little worried. I'm a
Yeah,
little worried.
I am too. I'm with you. Just all the signs we see here kind of point to a team that's still in the hunt, but they're not as dominant as they once were. And with
Yeah.
the Western Conference that now features these teams, I mean, last year you had Memphis, Sacramento, and Phoenix kind of in that mix. But I mean, Phoenix was definitely weaker. They had no bench. They were relying on two players, and we'll get to them a little bit more here in a minute. You have the Kings, very good team, but don't think any of us saw them as a true contender up there. And then you had Memphis, and they were missing, I believe, Steven Adams at the time, so they kind of dropped a little bit from that status. So it was really the Nuggets, and everybody else was kind of in a tier below at that point.
Yes.
And then
Exactly.
this year, it's like, hey, I mean, the Nuggets are in a dogfight, and that's just in the top four before we even get to a couple of teams that are dark horse contenders. So it's just loaded up there.
And I have one last little stat. So remember how I was talking about the December 1 start point, which is kind of when the Clippers finally integrated Harden.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at it from that December 1st starting point, there are 5 teams in the West that have outscored their opponents by more than 4 points per 100 possession since December 1st. The Nuggets are not one of those 5. The Suns have outscored opponents by 4 points per 100 since then, despite Beal and Booker being hurt for stretches. The Pelicans have outscored opponents by 6.5 points per 100 possessions over that stretch. And, they're one of those dark horse teams. They're very good.
Right.
And then we have those 3 teams in the West. We have the Clippers, we have the Timberwolves, and we have the Thunder. The Thunder outscored teams by 8 points per 100 since then. The Timberwolves 8.5, and the Clippers we already talked about 9.1. So
There you
those
go.
guys are kind of feeling like the cream of the crop right now, and the Nuggets feel like they're more stuck in that dogfight territory with the Suns and the Pelicans,
Yeah.
maybe.
The numbers aren't painting them in a pretty light right now, and a pretty picture. And perfect segue. You brought up the Thunder in that mix. They're another team that we've discussed at length on this podcast. So not going to take too much time with them. We've talked about Chet at length and J Dub and Shea. So
I
if you
talk
guys
about
want
them
to
all
check
the
that
time.
out, yeah, a whole bunch of them. If you look up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a link to one of our past videos on the Thunder. So be sure to check that out if you want to see all our thoughts. But to kind of break this down and really condense it into the meat and potatoes of it all, they are the most balanced team as far as offense and defense in the entire NBA. Number 4 in offense, number 4 in defense, 120.9 for the offense points per 100, 112.9 as far as points allowed per 100, plus 6.6 adjusted net rating. That's number 3 in the NBA. And I want to give a quick shout out to Dunks and Threes. These adjusted net ratings, I'm getting them from that website, and they have some great statistics across the board,
Estimated
net
plus minus.
ratings. Yep. So a little bit of a shout out to them. We talked about cleaning the glass. We get a bunch of numbers from them. Also want to shout out Dunks and Threes. Yeah. So if you guys are checking them out, definitely got to give them a look. They have a bunch of great stats for you to check out as the season progresses. But when it comes to the Thunder, I mean, 37-17, number 2 in the Western Conference. And this is a team that and I want to kind of go to this question here before we get into the whole playoff argument, if they could really win it all. Just the fact that they've made such a leap from last season. And Avi, you brought this up on one of our recent podcasts to how last season at this point you were talking about them as a plucky playing team. They were kind of scrapping to try to fight their way in. And this season, they're almost at the top, kind of looking down at everybody else in that mix to where they used to be. They used to be where the Warriors are, where the Lakers are, where all these teams down there in the bottom rung of the play-in are. Now they're firmly in elite territory. By every metric, they're elite. And I personally am surprised. I think you are as well, based on your comments from our past podcast. Surprised that they are this good. We knew that they would be solid this fast, especially when it comes to Chet's growth.
Yes.
I did not expect Chet to be one of the best rim protectors and overall defensive players from the get-go, while also being a super efficient offensive big man, able to just knock down threes at a high level and be a competent guy that's handling the ball and making things happen for himself and his teammates. Didn't see any of that coming. J-Dub, being a guy that can drop 30, he's trying to take a page out of Shea's book where Shea drops 30 every game. J-Dub is like, I could drop some 30s here and there too. I'm going to be a Shea light in that regard. But as far as just their offensive cohesion, Lou Dort being a 40 plus percent 3-point shooter, Isaiah Joe just being knocked down. I mean, he's been doing that. And now they get Gordon Hayward. We have thoughts about Gordon Hayward. So if you guys want to check that out, and how we think how he's going to fit in, we have that as well. But just across the board, awesome team. They're super efficient. They have great 3-point shooting. They're top 5 in that. They're top 5 in 2-point shooting. Shea is a big part of that. Shea and J Dub. I think as far as their chances in the playoffs, that gives them a great leg to stand on, because in the playoffs, teams
Yeah.
are scouting you. They're not going to give you your preferred action every single time down the court. Sometimes you're going to have to just get a bucket any means possible, whether it's a good shot, a bad shot. Hey, we need something. Go get us a shot. Shea's one of the best. J Dub is already great in that category. Just creating his own shot, just getting to that 14 to 17, 18 foot range, is just saying like, hey, I'm just going to make a shot over a smaller defender. I'm going to bully my way to the rim. I could take a page out of Shea's book again. Shea's one of the best rim pressure guys in the league. J Dub can do that as well with the length, body control, the power. He's got the whole package. So they have two players that when the situation calls for it, things drag down, they can get their own basket. We talked about the spacing. We talked about the shooting. We've talked about the defense.
Yes.
They have all that in spades. So I love their efficiency. I love their balance. I think those are their strengths. Weaknesses, we got to nitpick a little bit, but they are inexperienced. They haven't been on a big stage like this before. Most times teams have to kind of work their way up. They have to lose in the first or second round before they work their way up to the top.
I
Historic,
don't know, man.
maybe not. I mean, they have a chance, but historically that's been the case. They usually don't go straight to the finals in 1 year. And then the rebounding, they're bottom third in rebounding.
Yeah.
Chet gets bullied sometimes. If they play
Yes.
a team like Denver with Jokic, I mean, they have significant vulnerability in the paint when it comes to those power players. Those are the only real weaknesses I can think of. Every other metric and stat, they're fantastic. So I don't know what else to say other than I'm just shocked that they're here, but I'm happy that they're here, and they have a real legitimate chance of being one of the last teams standing in the playoffs.
You know, I would guess OKC fans probably love me because every opportunity I get to talk about OKC, I'm just spewing how much I love watching them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think I'm not going to do that this time, you are sorely mistaken. Because yes, it is incredible to me, as we just said. I'm not surprised that they got this good. I'm surprised that they got this good right out the gate to start the season this fast. Again, they were in that top three I was talking about where they're outscoring opponents by 8 points per 100 on clean glass since December 1st. It's
Mm-hmm.
them, the Timberwolves, and the Clippers. The fact that they're up there with that group, despite how young all their players are, Jalen Williams, J Dub, I expected this sort of growth from him, but even then, the level of shot making he has right now is far, not
Great.
far, but it's exceeding what I thought possible for him.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest one to me is Chet. I knew when they put a center in, oh, this defense is just going to be better because now you're not having to play Jay Will at center, and frankly, like that's just not a way to survive.
Yeah.
You can't live like that.
Right.
But the fact that he's been so good that even despite some of the concerns I have with him in terms of rebounding and the fact that, oh, if he's not blocking shots, there are times I feel like maybe he could do a little bit more in the passing lanes. But I mean, he was an all-star for me in his first year. Like I would have had him as one of my all-stars. And for him to be that, eh, in some ways they almost feel like a younger version of the Clippers. Like Shea is their Kawhi, and then Paul George and Harden are kind of their Jalen Williams and Chet in a way. It's not a perfect 1-to-1, but in terms of, oh, what if you just had the Clippers, but all their stars were young? It's just
Yeah.
there's synergy on the team. Everyone knows what they're built upon. They have a great offense and great defense. In that same December 1st All-Star break time period I'm telling you about, only the Celtics and the Thunder are top five, or at least top five on offense and top five on defense. Like they just have everything. And their one weakness, if I was going to nitpick, was going to be that their starting lineup doesn't actually outscore people by a large margin. But again, major caveat here: They just added Gordon Hayward.
Yep.
So, is it possible that that changes? I think it's likely that they might end up just putting in Hayward for Josh Giddey, and that would change things because now
Yeah.
you don't have anybody you can sag off of. And Giddey's playmaking and ability to pass the ball is useful, but if the ball is probably going to be in Shea and J Dubs, it's going to be the ball is going to be in their hands most of the time in a
Yeah.
playoff setting because typically you're not really giving it to your role players as much in the playoffs. I feel like having Gordon Hayward there as a shooter and as a connector might be that difference where, okay, now we have that second or third lineup we can rely on. We have other guys we can rely on. Josh Giddey can now come off the bench sometimes if need be. So they have the depth, and I could see them make the conference finals in their first year.
They could. They could. It's definitely on the table. So want to give them their props as again we usually do. At this point, I think we can fit right in as a Thunder podcast.
Oh,
If there was
100%.
a need for Thunder coverage, we can definitely do that with how much we've praised them and just cover them on this podcast. But it never gets old because they're deserving and they're really
And
just
it's not normal. Like
no,
we have
not at
to
all.
continually stress it. This is not normal. A team this young shouldn't be this good this fast.
Not at all. Not at all. They're completely
You look through
breaking
history,
trend
there
here.
are very few examples of teams that are this good. Even if someone tried to make a comparison with the Dynastic Warriors, well, even the Dynastic Warriors, by the time they were hitting that 2014, 2015 peak, they had to go get Sean Livingston. And Steph was older than some of these guys. Clay was older than
Yeah,
they did. It's not like you had a rookie and a second year player. Players from the 2022 draft come in and be your second and third best player and
that's
basically
incredible.
be playing like stars.
And absolutely incredible. So, I mean, by every stretch of the imagination, they've been fantastic and ahead of schedule. So,
Yeah.
those are the elites that we wanted to discuss. Real quick here to kind of end things off, we want to kind of give credit to two other teams that are maybe not quite in the elite, but they have their own cases to be feared
Yep.
in the Western Conference: Phoenix and New Orleans. So, they both have some things in their favor. Phoenix is one of the most talented teams in the NBA. They are eighth in point differential in the NBA at plus 4.1. They have, however, the most difficult schedule remaining in the NBA. The average winning percentage of their opponents remaining is 56%. That's
Oof.
tough. They have games against Boston, two games against Boston, Cleveland, Denver, OKC, Minnesota, the Clippers. Most of those teams we just talked about as elites, they have to play all the elites in the Western Conference before the end of the regular season. That's really going to hurt their case. Even at full health, which we don't know if that's going to be the case. I mean, guys could miss some games. KD, Beal, even at full health, that's a tough path to try to navigate at the end of the season. For New Orleans, they're right behind them in point differential. They're at number 9 at plus 4 uh, as far as the point differential. Now, for their case, they have a less talented team. They have a very deep team, but they don't have the top end talent of Phoenix. What they do have is a lot of home games and a much easier schedule. 15 home games left on their schedule is really going to help their case. So both teams, they have a strength as far as what's going to help them down the stretch, and they also have a factor in this equation that's going to hurt them down the stretch. But either way, both teams are very dangerous. Phoenix has Royce O'Neal now in the fold after that trade. It gives them a little bit more
Yeah.
depth, a little bit more shooting, a pretty solid defensive guy that can really be a connector for them.
Dan
Uh,
Young too.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So they have a lot of things going for them. With New Orleans, I mean, man, arguably the deepest team in the league. They have really solid players that don't get any playing time. Although losing Dyson Daniels to injury is going to hurt them a little bit
Yeah.
in that equation. But I mean, having Herb Jones and Brandon Ingram and Trey Murphy on the wing is such a luxury for them. Something that concerns me if they do make the playoffs and they get in there as like a round one opponent. I am not. Maybe this wouldn't hurt them that bad, and well, it depends on where they end up as far as their final seating spot. But Zion, I mean, he's a beast. He's going to do a lot of great things for them. But I mean, if you're trying to win at a high level like that, you're in a round one matchup against the Clippers team or the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Thunder, anybody like that, and you're relying on Zion to get you. I mean, he's going to be great, I'm sure, but just that lack of a jump shot, just the reliance on his left hand, just some of those factors, it could hurt them a little bit here. So I'm not as high on their odds as Phoenix as if they get in and can they make any kind of a run. I'm a little bit lower on them than the Suns. They could
Uh,
do it. They have great pieces, but I mean, with Phoenix having, I think a little bit more guys that they can lean on outside of that big two or three, it's going to help them a lot. So it's just going to come down to Phoenix. Can they finish, get out of the play-in spot? Because they do have a difficult schedule. That's the big question for them.
yeah, I think I want to touch on the Pelicans first, so that when I'm talking about the Suns, we're a little bit more optimistic. Like on paper, yeah, I feel really good about the Pelicans in a way for the regular season because of how deep their team is and their remaining schedule being so much easier. They could easily work their way into the 4th seed, and I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm nervous about their playoffs. Why? Because in the regular season, even with Dyson Daniels being injured, for example, right? They have a lineup that can go 10 or 11 deep right now, no problems. And it's filled with all these young players who are um, actually really good on defense, which helps cover for their uh, uh, defensive deficiencies in their starting lineups at times. So you have Jose Alvarado, you'll have Dyson Daniels when he's back. You have Herb Jones. Trey Murphy's actually a solid defender sneakily. Larry Nance isn't young, but when you play him, he's still a decently good defender. So when you have all of those players playing, you can actually increase your defensive effectiveness for the regular season. Alongside, here's why I'm nervous about them for the playoffs. Their starting lineup, how much do you think it's outscored opponents by during the regular season so far?
I don't think it's done that well as a lineup. I think I was
Oh,
reading
it's not.
Oliver's article about them in the Athletic earlier today, and he actually mentioned that their starting lineup, uh, haven't they been? It's either they've barely outscored opponents or they've been outscored.
Oh no, 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 sir. It's not good. With 749 possessions played, the lineup of CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, and Jonas Valanciunas has been outscored by 2.8 points per 100 possessions on cleaning the
I thought I
glass.
saw that. Yep, outscored. That's not
That's
a good sign.
that's not good.
No.
That's your starting lineup. Even if you slot Trey Murphy in, now you're losing. Who are you losing there? You're probably losing. You can't depend. See, that's the issue then. Now you can't depend on Zion as a small ball five because he's not a shot blocker like that, and he doesn't know where to be. Teams try to exploit him. If he's your small ball five, I mean, good luck. You're not going anywhere with that.
Hmm.
And if you take out Herb Jones, well, now you lost your best perimeter defender. I said Trey
Yeah,
Murphy's good.
he's
He's better
good.
than
Yeah.
you think, but he's not
Hmm.
Herb Jones. Herb Jones might be an all. He probably is an all defense, a first team or second team wing. So
For sure.
I mean, then maybe you're thinking about, oh, maybe we can put Larry Nance at the five. And yeah, that might be an option. But part of what's making them so devastating is the fact that they have all of these incredible offensive threats. And now, if you kind of nullify that by the fact that, hey, CJ is not going to support a high offensive usage anyways, and now you're getting rid of Valanciunas, and now you're depending on Larry Nance and Herb Jones kind of in the playoffs to be offensive contributors. I don't know how great I feel about that either. It
Yeah.
it feels a little bit like the Cavs last year when it was, hey, we need the two bigs and Isaac Okoro to go do something. Please, please go do something. That's the vibes I'm getting from that right now, which is why I'm a little concerned.
Me too.
I don't want to use the word paper tiger, but if ever there was a team to use the word paper tiger about in the West this year, it might be them.
Fair enough.
The Suns, on the other hand, the Suns, on the other hand, I feel surprisingly very good about them. Again, because if I go look at the lineup data, when they have the lineups with it, Eric Gordon's probably not going to take the place of Bradley Beal the way he has so far, but their lineup with Booker, Gordon, Grayson Allen, Durant, and Nurkic in around 400 possessions played has outscored opponents by 17 points for 100 possessions. And then their lineup with Booker, Bradley Beal, Grayson Allen, Durant, and Nurkic. Right, that's the lineup you're probably going to be counting on. In
Hmm.
around 600 possessions played, they've outscored opponents by 13 points per 100 possessions.
Mm,
So that's much more solid. That's a hearty playoff level starting five that you can count on. And now you
absolutely.
add the fact that they've got Royce O'Neal. Oh, sometimes they do this Kevin Durant as a small ball five thing, which I don't believe in, but that's okay because now you have Thad Young, who He's not as much of a shot blocker, and he's much older now. But I think I believe in him a little bit more as a small ball five, just because he's had years of reps doing it in a way
Yeah.
that I don't think Durant has always necessarily had. Even on teams like the Nets and Warriors, they still kind of like to use him as a power forward who's a shot blocker, not as the pure small ball five.
Yep.
So I feel like those additions actually do make a difference for this team. And even though I think there's a chance, I mean, they could easily finish being sixth, which would be a problem then just because of the matchups. Like if you end up facing the Thunder first round or the Clippers first round, that could be a problem. But
Hmm.
if they manage to avoid those two somehow, I like their I like their odds this year against a team like Denver more than I did in years past. And if
Yeah.
somehow they ended up facing New Orleans, I would definitely pick them over the Pelicans.
Me too. Me too. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cases we made for the Suns. I mean, I think we're in agreement. They're a better team overall than they were last year, especially with Grayson Allen. I mean, Grayson Allen's been one of the best shooters in the entire NBA this season, lacing the nets. So with him being on board, and then those two veterans you mentioned before, they have more guys they can lean on outside of just, oh hey, book KD, go make something happen. Because last year when it just boiled down to those two guys making everything happen, it was too much for them. So now that they have other options, they're in a lot better shape.
Can I throw out one last team just because of one crazy lineup quirk? It might not hold up, and that's why the next 27 or 28 games, however many are left, is very important to see. The staff: Brandon Podziemski, Wiggins, Kuminga, and Draymond Green, starting five. I recently assembled starting five, we should add, just because it took them so long to finally put Podziemski and Kuminga in the starting lineup and for Draymond Green to not be suspended.
Right.
They've played 200 possessions together, which is more than you'll see from a lot of bench combinations, but it's not as much as you'll see from starting
From
lineups, which will
starters.
typically
Yeah.
have like 600, 700 possessions played, which is
Right.
why we need more time to assess how strong they really are. But right now, with 200 possessions played, they've outscored opponents by, drumroll, 27 points per 100 possessions.
Wow.
So I just wanted to
Pretty
mention that
incredible.
because now that they have their real starting five, if they can go on a bit of a run here on in the back half of the season, especially with them having an easier schedule compared to most teams, they have the sixth easiest schedule.
Yep.
They, I mean, they could make some noise. I could see them climb all the way up until up. I could see them be the eight at least, like the eight seed,
Yeah.
and maybe win the playing game against Dallas even potentially. I mean, Dallas is
Okay.
another. They've made some additions, so
Yep.
we don't know how good they'll be yet. They also need the back half to for us to kind of determine how good they'll be. But I
Hmm.
could see the Warriors, especially with Peyton back and Chris Paul coming back. I could see them be a sneaky seven seed.
I could see it too. I could see it too, for sure. I mean, they came in last season as a lower seed, playing
Yeah.
Sacramento, and they beat Sacramento. So I mean, it could be another situation this year. So from top to bottom in that Western Conference, from 1 to 10, basically, I mean, it's just going to be a fascinating race all the way down. So every game matters. There's a bunch of tiebreaker implications there with all these games remaining against each other. So, especially with Phoenix, I think every Phoenix game is critical because they play
Oh,
so many of those
100%.
teams up above them in the standings. So, I mean, every game is just going to be critical. So, don't miss a game in the Western Conference. I think that's kind of like the point we're trying to make. They're all critical, and the Western Conference playoffs are going to be absolutely insane. Even the playing matchups are going to command attention because
Oh
they're going
my
to be
God.
that
Yeah.
that high profile, man. But I think that's about it for our podcast today. So much we've covered here with these six teams, and they're just all so fun to watch, man. So I hope everybody here enjoyed this 100th installment. If you stuck with us this long, we really appreciate you. Avi and I, Colin, Anil, Oliver, Ali, Aaron Perlstein, we all thank you guys so much for your support. And we're not going anywhere. We're still maintaining the website, Draft Capital, our cap sheets, NBA calendar, podcast. So much content for you guys to check out. So we hope you will continue to do so. And we hope you'll stick around for the ride as we continue our episodes, our interviews, our deep dives, and all the rest of it. So thanks for sticking through 100, and we will definitely be back with more episodes real soon. So take care, guys. Enjoy this restart of the season, and we'll see you in the next one.